guys, so today we are going to go over really quickly how to put on the next layer of feathers. Apparently this is a gap in the tutorials that I have missed, and somebody brought it up on the Discord. So we're going to go ahead and do that now because that is absolutely a part you should know how to do. So what we're going to do is we are going to be gluing real feathers to the fake feathers that we have here. The sleeves themselves cover up the framework and create the top layer of feathers. And by necessity, the sleeve needs to dip down by the elbow area over here. And because of that, they do have a row in that area of the turkey quills, the longer quills, that create the second layer. But we don't put that all along the entirety of the sleeve. The sleeve itself is meant to move and buckle, and the less fabric you have, the better. So what we do instead, because we don't want our second layer of feathers necessarily to be on that sleeve, because that sleeve can buckle and warp, and the bigger it is, the worse that problem gets. And so instead of making that sleeve bigger and putting the quills on the sleeve and having all the real feathers on a sleeve, we do put some onto our fake feathers here, and we glue them on directly with hot glue. And so that's what I'm going to be doing here, and I'm going to just go over the process, go over how we do it. So yeah, let's get to work. So first, just a quick reminder, when we're gluing down feathers, we're going to be using hot glue. So we want to make sure we break our feathers a little bit. See how they're kind of curved? So we're going to very gently press on the top of the feather just to snap it a little bit. If you get a full break, that's not good. You don't want that. You just want to kind of bend it so it has like a little kink in it. And that allows it to lay a little bit flatter so that the glue, when the feathers press down, that curve that you see, that doesn't then bow up and separate the real feather from the fake feather. So this helps us, like flattening out this feather, helps us glue it down just a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of lay these out, keeping in mind fatter feathers on the top, and you're going to make sure that there's a dip right around that wrist joint and 2 swoops around the hand and the elbow here. Just like we talk about in the design video. You're going to start with your fatter feathers on the top, and you're going to cover just about 1/3 or more of the real feather. And you're also going to make sure that you're covering your string line. So I glue pretty quickly. As you can see here, I don't necessarily trim everything first and then relay it out or do too much adjustment, but that's because I've been doing it a lot. You also want to make sure, you may need to use 2 feathers in some cases, but you want to make sure that you cover the edge of your real feather, because if you have those lines constantly there, it's very clear that these feathers are glued to a real feather, and it just doesn't look quite as good. So make sure you got some overlap there. You'll notice here that I am gluing about 1/2 to 2/3 of the feather max. You want to leave a little wiggle room at the tips. This allows for preening later on. As you use these, they're definitely going to start looking a little ragged, and you want to make sure that you don't, if you glue it all the way down, preening these becomes a nightmare, and that's something you want to make sure that you're able to do in terms of maintenance, rather than having to pull these off every single time. So next you'll see we're at the wrist joint, and there's just this little bit of space that you can't really cover with 1 feather. So, and this is pretty common, you're going to have to use 2 around here because the gap is slightly larger. So don't get too concerned if you need to use an extra feather to cover that gap. Another thing you might notice is sometimes you're going to get a gross feather like this, and you could just trim the tips to get rid of any ugly spots. You can also trim them to be a different shape as well. So if your character has all pointy feathers, you can actually point these. You can swoop them. You can do all kinds of cool shapes with them. So if you need to do that for your character, absolutely doable and really easy. Also, just make sure that, like, even if it's going to be partially covered, get rid of any gross feathers that you find. Not every feather you get in your batch is probably going to be a good one. So just keep in mind that you are going to discard, as much as 10% of what you're sent. You may also notice here at the elbow joint, we do have a little bit more string line to cover. This is another place where you may find that you need to use 2 feathers to cover places, especially on that last feather on the other side. So again, don't be afraid to use an extra feather if you need to here and there to help with your coverage. Right, and we're pretty much done here, just making sure that everything looks good. This is the swoop that we want. Everything works right. So we're going to flip it over and start on the other side. The biggest thing to note here is that these feathers overlap. One side has a feather and one side doesn't. And visually, the feather that you can feel underneath is actually going to go on the next feather down or the next feather up, depending on what side you start on. So I can feel the feather on that side of the real feather, and so the real feather on this side has to go on the next one down, because visually that's where it sits in the same spot on this side. So you're going to end up reaching underneath and feeling where the feather is and placing the feather back on. On this side, I just do a few feathers here and there, some choice feathers around the wrist, and the longest feathers at the front, but then I'm done. I'm just gonna then fill in the blanks. Anyway, I hope that helps answer some of your questions. If not, leave me some more in the chat. Thanks for watching!